This question that I want to touch on tonight borders on, it sort of overlaps two areas. On the one hand, it's business ethics, because you'll see there's $10,000 on the line here in this issue. But it also goes beyond that into other issues of morality and ethics. So I prepared this Mar Makomus page, and I want to just give you the shiur. The shiur comes from Mishpatei Torah. Remember I mentioned the sefer in the past, and he has the following issue. An individual is rushed to the hospital for emergency surgery. The doctors tell him before the surgery that his situation is the following: very severe. If he does nothing, he's got a very short amount of time to live. His days are numbered. The chances of the surgery being successful are also very low. They told him right up front, 90% chance that he will not survive the surgery. But on the 10% chance that it might be successful, it's a better option than not surgery. He asks if he has time before the surgery to meet with his rabbi. And they grant him that. His Rav comes to see him, and in a closed room, in a private discussion, he says to the rabbi, I don't think I'm going to survive this, but I want to do tshuva, especially for two terrible sins that I committed. One is, unbeknown to my partner, I was able to steal from him $10,000. To this day, he doesn't know anything about it. The other terrible sin that I committed is I lived with a married woman, and he names the woman, before I did tshuva 5 years ago. And he asks the Rav to help him go through the process of tshuva before he enters into the surgery. So if you'll see on the page I gave you, the title of this is Ne'emanus HaChola Al Viduyav B'Eis Cholya, which means, what is the status, halachically, what is the credibility of vidu, of a person who confesses crimes at the time of his, what he thinks at least, is going to be his imminent death. In this particular case, Chaz Shamayim, there were some sort of divine compassion. There was a 10% chance that the surgery would be successful, and indeed it was successful. The man had an amazing recovery. 2 weeks later, he was walking around. And of course his Rav was very happy. It was a great joy. But his Rav kept on imploring him to return the $10,000 to his partner. And he kept refusing to do so. Now, word gets back to the partner about his vidu. It's not clear exactly how he found out about it.
There's only one option, though.
Somehow through the rabbi, if that's what you mean.
Yeah.
But I don't know if the rabbi told him directly or I don't know exactly. Those details are left out. But be that as it may, this partner demands payment, reimbursement for the embezzlement of $10,000. At that point, the Cholish and Israpeh, this fellow who survived the surgery, denies the whole story. The only one who can now testify, obviously, is the Rav. He's the one who heard it. He heard the vidui. Can he support the claim of the partner, and based on that claim, force this individual to pay up to $10,000?
Does the partner have any evidence that it happened, or is
no evidence whatsoever? It all depends upon whether we accept this vidui. Now, there may be certain halachic principles that are floating through your mind, but before you mention them, I want to go on to the second issue here, and that is the status of the woman about whom this man confessed had relations outside of the framework of marriage, an adultery relationship, which means that she's not allowed to be married to a husband, which is called in the technical language tumah, and she has to get divorced. What weight does he have, or his vidui, his confession before, again we call it death, but he survived it, in terms of that marriage relationship?
Sounds like he's going to wish he was dead.
Yeah, that's right. So the first question, I'll read to you the language of the She'elah. Ha'im Rashoy Beit Hadin al smach divrei harav. Does the court have the power, the authority, on the basis of the claim, the testimony of the rabbi, l'chayev et hamitvadeh, to force the one who recited his vidui, bal karcha, against his will, l'shalim l'chutvo aseres alofim dolar? That's question number one. Question number two.
Against his will?
Well, he's not willing to pay. So can the courts force him to pay against his will?
His vidui wasn't against his will.
Is he saying he never loaned or never took the $10,000?
Oh, so we're going to get into it. See, there are two possibilities. Either he could say he never recited such a vidui,
right? Or
he could say, I recited such a vidui, but I never actually stole the $10,000. What I told the rabbi was just a bluff. And the obvious question you can ask yourself is, why would a man bluff on his deathbed? You know, the whole thing is odd. But again, we have to break this down into its component parts. A, what if he denies the whole story, so it's his word against the rabbis, because you and I would rather trust the rabbi. But what does the halacha say about it? And secondly, even if I grant you that in a case of his word against the rabbis, we might want to choose, I want to give more credibility to the rabbi than him, but does the credibility of the rabbi have the power to force this man to pay up? Sometimes you could have, for example, one witness who's believed, but that's not exactly enough evidence to force a person to pay.
I have another question.
Just give me one more minute, David. And the second question, what about this married woman? And this misvada, according to his confession, had lived with her in an adultery relationship. Nesra al baila. Does she now become prohibited to her husband? And again, what's she saying? Which we're going to get into in a minute. Go ahead.
For Catholics, there's a legal protection in many countries of the confidentiality of the confessional, right? In cases of very serious crimes. Within Judaism, there is no such protection. Is that correct?
As far as I know.
So what a congregant tells his rabbi, what a person tells his rav, right, is not necessarily a sacred trust in the sense it's confidential. Is that correct?
I think so. But the issue of confidentiality should be taken up, I think, as a separate issue. What we want to study tonight is what's the status of vidui.
No, I agree. All I'm saying is, if it's a confession, right? Vidui is a confession.
Correct.
Vidui is a confession. Is the Rav stepping out of line at all, revealing it? Right? And the answer is no, he's not. This is not a Catholic situation.
Right. I don't see that as
Jews,
a problem.
that's not an issue. Okay, right. I just want to clarify it, that's all.
There are other issues that I'm not touching on tonight, which are called dina de malchusa dina. In other words, what happens if the law of the land, views this in one light, and the Jewish law views it in another light? There's a conflict between the two. As I say, that would require a separate shiur.
Right.
But for tonight, what we want to focus on is assuming that the rabbi comes forward and testifies in the court and has the right to do so.
Right.
What weight do we give to his testimony? What weight do we give to the confession itself? Now, before I read to you his response, the Mishpatei Torah, his name is Rav Spitz. What I'd like to do is go through some source material with you together And we begin with a Gemara in Beit Midrash on Daf Gimel and Beis. The Gemara records a machlokes between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim. We know that if a man violates what's called an Isur Kares, a severe violation, bishogeg, unintentionally, then he has to bring what?
Korban.
Korban. What's that korban called?
Chatas.
Chatas. Can we force him to bring a korban chatas? What happened is, if two witnesses testify against Ruvain that we witnessed him eating chalev, bishogeg, and therefore he must bring a korban chatas, and he denies it. The accused denies it. So Rabbi Meir says, chayav, he's got to bring a korban chatas. It's his word against two witnesses. The Torah always trusts two witnesses. And the Chachamim say he doesn't have to bring a chatas. Why doesn't he bring a chatas? So the Gemara uses a strange language. You'll see this on line 3. Ma'im yirtza lomar mezid hayis. He has the ability to say, oh yes, I ate chalev, but it was an intentional violation. For an intentional violation of chalev, does he bring a korban chatas? No. So Rashi says, Hayayachal lomar mezid hayisivi poter min hakorban af kisha amar lo achalti poter demalo l'shaker. Since if he wanted to circumvent the obligation to bring a korban, he could have done so by claiming he was a mezid. Therefore, believe him when he says that he never ate chalev. What does that smack of? What concept in halacha? Believe me when I say X, because I could have said Y.
Migu.
Migu. Sounds like a migu. Now let's ask ourselves the question, well, indeed, if he would have stepped forward and said, I ate chalev b'mezid, would he be believed? So all the Rishonim, which I quote here, you'll see the Ramban and the Tosas Rid, they all yell and scream, no, he would not be believed if he testified in court, I ate chalev.
Well, he's not, of course. If he's saying, I'm enjoying eating chalev.
Well, no, let's say he says, I ate chalev, but now I did tshuva. I'm not an apikoros. But why isn't the person believed to say, I ate chalev? So here we have another principle, which comes from other Gemaras. Namely what?
Because he's making himself a Russia.
Correct. Ein other mesim atzor Russia. Self-incrimination is not acceptable in Jewish law. So here the Gemara is saying, he, according to Chacham, he doesn't bring a karma when two witnesses testify that he ate chalev b'shogeg. Why? Because he could have claimed, yeah, I ate the chalev. What you saw is correct, but I was amazed. That they could never know. So the Rishonim say, what do you mean? He's not believed to say, I ate chalev v'mezid. That would be in violation of the principle of ein adam mesim atzma. Person is not believed to incriminate himself.
But the idea of bringing korban, if you're b'shogeg, is it's a chesed on the part of Hashem. It's an easy way out. Why would a person, just because of the expense, why would a person not bring it?
Well, again, we have to determine whether he actually ate the chalev. He's claiming he didn't eat the chalev. So what do we do in this case? Do we force him to bring a korban? Rabbi says yes. We have two edim. That's objective evidence. That's clear as day that he ate the chalev. He's got to bring a korban. Chacham say no. Let's believe him. So one issue that the Rishonim are going to raise is, well, it's a migu on his part that he didn't eat the chalev against two witnesses. And two witnesses is more powerful, outweighs a migu. That's one issue. So how do the Chacham say that he's part? Another issue, which is the one we want to focus on, is, so what? Had he confessed to the crime, b'mezid, your assumption is he would be believed? Why would he be believed? That's in violation of the principle of ein adam mesim atzmo rosh.
Yeah, but then what happens? What about the Adam, though? What are we saying about the Adam?
The status of the Adam henceforth, you mean? Do we believe them? No, according to the Chachamim?
Right, if he's risking Adam, ein adam mesim atzmo rasha, so what happens to those two Adam? They just testify they chela for nothing?
Did you call her Sal and her?
Wait a minute, what are you assuming now? You're assuming now
Isaac.
that he's believed that he doesn't have to bring a carbon like the Chachamim.
Right.
Despite the fact that the Adam testified that he did eat chelev.
Right.
So what do we do with the Adam?
Yeah.
That doesn't bother me, because again, if let's say all things are equal and we don't know who to believe, he's not going to bring a carbon.
Correct.
So if his migu squares off with the Adam, we'll call it 50-50, it's even Steven, then we don't know who's telling the truth, but we certainly can't force him to bring a carbon. Alternatively, as we'll see in Tosfos and the Ramban and so forth, maybe as far as carbon is, because it's a very personal issue, so we can believe him, even though objectively maybe we should believe the Adam. So I'm not so worried about the Adam, but I want to know, would he be believed? Does he have ne'emanos through confession of a crime? And that's going to be relevant to our issue, because if you remember, Al Cholel on his deathbed, again he survived it, confessed to two different severe crimes. The question is, do we believe him? So if you take a look at the Ramban explains that this issue of bringing a carbon is an exception to the rule, because it's a milsa de nafshehi. It's something very personal. And therefore, whether he is chayiv a carbon or not chayiv a carbon, that's in a different domain. That's more in a private realm. The Tosfos Rid says that even though in general ein adam mesim atzmo rasha, but if a person has vested interests to make himself into a rasha, if he gains something monetarily by incriminating himself, then we should believe him. And in this case, by saving himself the hassle of bringing a carbon, maybe we should believe him. But what I'd like to focus on is Tosfos, which is the fourth source on your page. V'im tomar v'heich neman lomar mezer ha'yisi ha'ein adam mesim atzmo rasha, and he quotes the Gemara in Sanhedrin. Yesh lomar the eino neman lifsol atzmo aval hacha oset tshuva v'eino rotze lahavi chulin lazar. This man is doing tshuva for the crime of eating chelev. If he'll bring the carbon knowing that he was amazed, that's called chulin lazar. He's not chayav a carbon, and he violates a terrible avera if he brings a carbon when he's not chayav a carbon. That's called chulin lazar. So therefore, says Tosfos, we have all the reason in the world to believe him. So you'll take a look at the next source, is the Gemara Krisus. The Gemara Krisus Daf Yud Beis says that Adam neman al atzmo yoser mimea ish. A person is believed with regard to his own obligations, even against the testimony of 100 witnesses. So if a man comes into court and he says, I owe Ruvain $1,000, he'll have to pay the $1,000, even if the Adam contradict him. Adam neman al atzmo. But to make himself a rush, he's not believed. However, in cases where we really think that he's telling the truth, if there's heavy evidence weighing in for his credibility, then we overlook or override the principle of ein adam mesim atzmo rasha. What would be a reason to believe that he's telling the truth? Because he's doing tshuva. If he's doing tshuva, he doesn't want to bring a carbon when he's not obligated to do so. That would be in violation of chulul azara. Let's come full swing back to our case now. In our circumstance, why does he tell the rabbi about his two sins? He's doing what?
He's doing tshuva.
He's doing tshuva. No, if he's doing tshuva, then we have reason to believe that what he says is true. And we don't apply the principle of Ein Adam Meis Matzmo Rosh. Ein Adam Meis Matzmo Rosh is not an absolute rule. It's not ironclad. Usually we don't believe a person. But if there's heavy evidence weighing in to believe him, for example, he's doing tshuva, and in the process of tshuva he has to incriminate himself by confessing his crime, then we suspend the normal rule of Ein Adam Meis Matzmo Rosh, and we believe him. And I'll tell you something else. There's also a sugya in Sanhedrin called Palgina Diburu. A man incriminates himself, but in the incrimination, his testimony is relevant to something else or someone else. We split it in half. We say, insofar as his testimony incriminating himself, we don't believe him, but we will believe him as far as someone else is concerned. For example, if, let's say, his criminal act generates a monetary obligation to pay monies that he stole or embezzled, then we'll say the following: we don't believe that you embezzled it, but you do admit that you owe the money. So Palgina Dibur, we'll split it. We won't believe you to passel yourself. We'll believe you to pay up the money, to be mechayiv yourself in dini moments. Here, he says he stole from his partner. He confesses on his deathbed, we'll call it, $10,000. So let's believe him as far as the chiv moment is concerned, to pay up the $1,000. We might not believe that he stole it, because that would be Ein Adam Meis Matzmo Rosh. And Kal V'chomer, we should believe him. How much more so when he's doing tshuva? Because now the principle of Ein Adam Meis Matzmo Rosh doesn't kick in at all.
And the part with the woman?
Okay, we're going to come to the woman in a minute. So let me read to you the comment of the Shach in Choshen Mishpat, which you'll see here on the page. The Shulchan Aruch says that a person on his deathbed, that's called a Shchiv Meirah, who makes a claim, or I should say admits to a claim, that he owes money, later on, if he comes forward and says, I was not serious about it, it was a joke, we don't believe him. A man on his deathbed is very serious. He doesn't make jokes. And that's based on a Gemara in Bava Basra, which you'll see here on the page. Ein Adam Mishate B'Shas Misa. Person doesn't say things that are cynical or lightheaded on his deathbed. However, the Shach disagrees. The Shach in Choshen Mishpat Siman Pei Aleph says Lefi ani inestaiti ze eino. And even if he confessed that he owes money at the time of his death, later on he could say Meshata Ayisi, I wasn't serious, and he could deny it. However, all the poskim reject the Shach. The Nesivos and the Ktzos and the Tumim, one after the other, they all subscribe to the position of Rav Yosef Karo that when a person says he owes money on his deathbed, he cannot later on deny it and say, oh, I was just joking around. Meshata Isiba. In fact, the Mishnah says, and that you'll see here, the third source before the end of your page in Gittin, that if the Kohanim were doing the Avodah and bringing a carbon on behalf of someone, and they said, we accidentally had the wrong machshava, the wrong thoughts, and that's called pigul, and therefore the whole carbon is null and void, which is a tremendous financial loss to the Baal carbon, he's going to have to replace it. So the Mishnah says, if you'll see it, Mizidim chayovim. If they claim that they did it deliberately, they'll have to pay for the carbon, like a mazik. If they say they were shogeg, they did it inadvertently, then although the carbon is completely invalidated, they don't have to pay because they did it b'shogeg. But how do we know that they were mefagel? We only know it from their own admission. But I know the Mesa Matzma Rosh, a person can't incriminate himself. So once again, you see that there's an exception to the rule. If this man is saying, the Kohen, that I was mefagel, which implies that I have to pay to replace the carbon because I caused its deficit, why would a person lie under those situations and incur such a major obligation, financial obligation? So whenever we have reason to believe, the evidence weighs in that he's telling the truth, despite the fact that he's incriminating himself, he's believed. So if a person is part of the process of tshuva on his deathbed, he confesses to a crime, he says, I embezzled $10,000 from my partner, we're not going to apply the principle of Eino Demeis Matzah Rosh. We're going to assume that he is telling the truth. Now, based on all these sources, and I'll read to you the conclusion of the Mishpatei Torah, he says the following: Im hacholeh shehivri modeh, if he confesses shachen b'yeis cholyo hisvadu b'fnei Rabbo, he doesn't deny the confession itself. He says, yeah, I said it to the rabbi. True, the rabbi's not lying. Ella los kavanti b'ritzinus, I didn't mean it seriously. Harei chayav l'shalem l'shutfo es molo aschum anal. He will be penalized, or I shouldn't say penalized, but he will be obligated to pay up the entire sum of $10,000. And if he's not willing to pay, then Beit Din will force him to pay. Why? Because he doesn't deny that he made the confession. He claims rather that the confession was not serious. He didn't mean it. It was a joke. We don't take this as a joke. We take it very seriously. It means he embezzled? He's incriminating himself? Eino Demeis Matzah Rosh? The answer is that Eino Demeis Matzah Rosh is not an absolute rule. If we have reason to believe that he was serious, that he was honest, then we don't apply the principle of Eino Demeis Matzah Rosh. There is ne'emonos, even to incriminate yourself, if we believe you're telling the truth. However, says the Mishpatei Torah, what if he denies that he ever made the confession? It's his word against the rabbi. V'toin, and he claims Shemei Olam Lo Amar LeRabbo Dover Zeh. He never confessed to such a crime. Then Rashai Hashutaf L'Tovo B'Beit Din Al Smach Eidut Harav, the partner has rights to claim the $10,000 based on the testimony of the rabbi, but it's only one witness. It's only the rabbi. The partner has no evidence and no knowledge. So what's the story when one witness says that Ruvain owes Shimon $10,000? What does Ruvain have to do when he denies the claim? Don't answer at once. He takes an oath. One witness is believed in a Jewish court of law to be mechayev shvua, to generate an obligation to swear. You, the defendant, have to take an oath to contradict the testimony of one witness. If you refuse to take the oath, you have to pay. You have two choices: either take the oath or pay. Therefore, in this case, that the rabbi has the evidence, the weight of one aid, of one witness. If Yiru Bezdin Shanitba Minaselit Chamek Mil Shava, we see that this guy is trying to wiggle his way out of it. He doesn't want to take the oath, and none of his excuses really convince Beit Din He said, oh, I don't want to take an oath, it's too heavy, it's too, all of a sudden he became such a saint. They could force him to pay. He refused to take the oath. However, if it seems to Beit Din that he, the defendant, in this case, right, the chola that is willing to take the oath. However, our courts are not too enthused about imposing an oath. Then he says, Beit Din should work out a compromise. He says the following: Im yira lebeit din shanitba muchan li shava, he's willing to take the oath. Rashai Beit Din limana milashbio, they can withhold the oath and make a compromise. Compromise is usually
compromise.
So that I don't know. That's not clear to me from the truth. But it seems from his language, lachufo litpasher, that they do have the power to force him to compromise. Now, I'm not sure if he would have had to sign a compromise agreement up front, or just simply based on the testimony of one witness against him, that's enough to force a compromise.
What's a compromise?
The compromise would be $5,000.
But he's saying nothing.
Doesn't matter. He's obligated to take an oath, and we cannot impose the oath. So you have to sort of redeem the oath. How do you redeem the oath? You pay half the price. Again, this is only because there's such heavy evidence against him.
This is with the assumption that the witness is an impeccable witness, which it seems to be.
Correct.
With nothing to gain.
Correct.
In this case. Correct.
Now, let's finish up. I know it's getting late. What time is it now?
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
It seems to me that if the person is already denying a fact, right, he's not a God-fearing person. So when he's asked to take an oath, it should be relatively easy for him to take the oath. I mean, if this is true, if he did make the confession, and now he's saying, my Rav is a liar, right? Why does he have any problem taking the oath? He's obviously not a God-fearing man.
It's interesting.
And maybe that's why the Beit Din doesn't want to impose it on him.
The halacha operates with a very, for this we'd have to learn a lot about mitzvah, but the halacha operates with the following premise. A person could be a no-good thief. He embezzles money. He doesn't care about lo signo, but he won't take a false oath.
Because the punishment is correct?
I wouldn't say it's correct, but it's close to it. Again, we could discuss this at great length, but about the violation of Shvuah Sheker, the Torah says, Lo Yenaker. His children will be punished. It's generations. It's a whole thing. The Gemara says when the Torah said, Lo Tisa Shem Hashem L'Shava, you can't take an oath in vain with God's name, the world, the universe shook. Abramel's Parsal, Abramel's Parsal. The severity of the oath is beyond comprehension, and it penetrated into the human, I should say the Jewish consciousness, way beyond the Easter of Gzeil. It's mind-boggling.
What is bearing false witness? Like when he
false witness is also very severe, but in a sense, Shvuah Sheker is even more severe,
Okay.
because you take the name of God.
Right.
It's an absolute desecration of the name of God. And the worst thieves were afraid of a shvuah. That's called in the Gemara's language, chashed amamona, lo chashed ashvuasa. What about the woman? So here I want to call your attention to a Mishnah in the Dharam, which is the last source on your page. And the Mishnah says that Barishona, originally there were two historical periods. Hayu Omrim, the halacha was that there are three women who have to get divorced from their husbands, one of which is a woman who says, Homeres Tme'ani L'cha, I had relations, extramarital relations. She can no longer live with her husband, will force him to give a divorce. Bachrona, later on in Jewish history, Chazal had a reversal. And they said she's not believed. Why? Shema Nasna Eineh Ba'acher. Maybe, perhaps, she wants to get out of this marriage. She has her eye on somebody else. She didn't actually have adultery with him. She's lying. But she figures, you know what? I got a joker card here. I have an easy way of forcing his hand, my husband's hand, to divorce me. I'm going to say I had relations with another me. She's not believed. Now, the conclusion of all this might be that if in our case we were to subpoena the woman to court, even if she were to admit to the crime, the so-called accusation, we would still not break up this marriage. Why? Because we paskin halacha like the Mishnah Achrona. The final word is that a woman's not believed to say she had extramarital relations. So therefore, the Mishnah Torah says something that we have to analyze. He says, "B'yachas levidu yachol lifnei harav shechai chai ishus be'isur meishes ish," and the chol himself admits that he did recite that vidu, he did confess to that crime. Ha'isha gam kein moda, she also admits that she had this relationship. Now, we put together her admission together with his claim, which he made under vidu, and he's not denying it. He says, "Chayav habal legarish ishta." We will force the husband to divorce his wife. Afilu im baila eino mamin lidvareh. Even though the husband doesn't believe her, nevertheless, he has to divorce his wife. And the reason for this is because the Mishnah Rishona was not totally rejected. The Mishnah Rishona says that if we don't have any evidence other than the fact that she admits to the crime, we don't believe her. She may have vested interests. However, if there is external evidence that supports our conclusion that she's telling the truth, then the poskim say we go back to the Mishnah Rishona. The Mishnah Rishona was not totally rejected, as I said before. We don't usually believe her. We think she's lying. That's the Mishnah Achrona. But the Mishnah Rishona believes her. We will fall back on the Mishnah Rishona and embrace that halacha if we have evidence, circumstances that indicate, or some testimony that indicates that she's telling the truth. What evidence do we have?
The other confession.
Correct. Maybe he's lying too.
Yeah, it could be in cahoots.
He's the same guy who was lying
But
earlier.
the answer is, when did he make this confession?
We thought he had nothing to lose.
When he thought, and this is clear, this is not questionable, that he was about to die. What a person says on his deathbed gives credence, gives some extra weight of evidence to his confession. That evidence is enough to shift from the Mishnah Achrona back to the Mishnah Rishon. However, what happens if she denies the claim? He says the following: Aval im ha'isha makrishas divrei hacholeh. Even though there's a lot of evidence that this man on his deathbed was telling the truth, ein ha'isha neser salpayim. We will not bust up this marriage. Why? Because his word alone is not sufficient, even with all the weight of the evidence. And here we employ the principle of ein davar shebe'erev ha'pachas mishnayim. We need two witnesses to testify against a woman on such a severe crime with such heavy repercussions as to break up the marriage. If we only have one witness, no matter how believable that witness is, that's not enough. And she still remains muteris l'bayla. So let's just summarize. If she admits that she had this relationship, then together with his evidence, the evidence of his confession, which is very weighty, we go back to the Mishnah Rishon. If, on the other hand, she denies it, and that all we have now is his testimony on his deathbed, which is very weighty, but it only adds up to one witness, we cannot break up this marriage. In fact, he goes a step further. Odif shelo l'sapra l'bayla. That's a whole discussion unto itself. He says, better not to even tell the husband about it. Let the marriage continue as is.
What if she?
Oh,
Sorry. What if she admits and the person who's on his deathbed recants, but the Rav says, "But I heard you say."
Yeah, that's the real situation.
Can the Rav be the second witness?
correct.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So then it doesn't matter if the person recants or not.
As long as you have the testimony of the rabbi that he made that confession. So
But
given the fact that
you're
this
saying
is the
that
guy-
it's not directly from the horse's mouth; it's one person removed.
But again, if we believe the rabbi, and that goes back to our first issue, which we said at least we believe the rabbi enough to force a shvuah, an oath, and that has tremendous weight because if he doesn't take the oath, he has to pay $10,000, but it could have been $1 million. So you see that the testimony of the rabbi as an independent source of evidence is very weighty. That should be enough to bring us back to the Mishnah Rishona. The Mishnah Rishona says that if a woman admits to the crime, then we break up the marriage. We suspended the Mishnah Rishona because we said that's not enough evidence. We really think she's lying. She might be lying. She has vested interests here. She's making up the whole story. But if we realize from independent evidence that indicates that she's not making up the story, this is not something that that she invented for her convenience sake to achieve our goal of getting a get and getting out of this marriage. So there's an independent source of evidence. Then we go back to the Mishnah.
So I just want to get clear.
It's fascinating, though.
If the man on his deathbed says, "I was just joking with my Rav," we assume that that's not true, right? And he has to pay the full $10,000, and in fact we accept that evidence in terms of the divorce as well. If he says, "I never said it," and the Rav is making it up, then he has to swear an oath or make a compromise at that point. In which case we're believing the Rav at that point to a very large degree, but we can't force the issue.
But again, not because
So we
he's a
believe-
Rav, but as an Eidech.
And as
one witness.
as a good witness, So because he's a good witness, his corroboration for her saying, the Rav is not the person on deathbed. The Rav is corroborating her statement. Yes, I did commit this act, and then we break up the marriage. Okay.
One last thing, and then I'll let you go. He says, what if a woman on her quote-unquote deathbed, if that's what she thinks, confesses to having an extramarital relationship, and then she survives this choli and she's healthy, and now she continues to admit and confess the crime that she had confessed on her deathbed. She wants to do tshuva. She would like to remain married to her husband. What do you do in that case? All we have is her testimony and nothing else. We have no external evidence. There's no Rav, there's no Boel, the one who had the relations with her, who admitted it. There's no Eid Echad. So I thought this would be an open and shut case. This is the Mishnah Achrona against the Mishnah Rishona. He says the following: In viduya haykishahoisa chola b'machla shalohoisa ba sakanas chayim. If she recited that vidu when her life was not threatened, or it's not a hopeless situation, a very dangerous one, very dangerous illness, but there was a sikui savir, I don't know how to translate that, there's a probability, a reasonable probability, shetavri, then we don't believe her. And even though she's telling us that she's confessing because she wants to do tshuva, it's still one admission, one confession of hers, and her husband can remain married. However, im matzava rafui shel isha beit viduyeha hayadoma lenidon b'shevasheilo. If, however, the circumstances surrounding her confession at the time of her illness were parallel, was similar to the one that we described in our case, the physicians told her, forget it, your body will not survive this disease. Even if we operate, even with the surgery that we recommend, there's a 10% chance that you'll survive it. Then, im hisvadasa, if she recited this vidu and confessed to this crime after the physicians told her that her days are numbered, that she has very, if minute, if any, chance of surviving, and then yom li achar avidui higia lebeit cholim rofei, miracle of miracles, the day after her confession, who shows up in the hospital? A physician. Shenisat la shita chadshanit. He's got a new method of surgery, a new, what word am I looking for?
Therapy.
The new procedure. Ubechazdei shamayim hitzliach l'raposa b'mikra zeh ne'emenes b'dvareh. We believe what she said at the time of her confession. He neseres al baila v'chayav ha-baila l'garsha. We go back to the Mishnah Rishon. It says we trust our confession, because even though there's no independent source of evidence to support our confession, but nevertheless the context of our confession itself.
Yeah, she can't be using the confession to get out of her marriage if she's dying.
Exactly.
It doesn't make sense.
Okay, my friends.